All right, good afternoon, everyone. It is 1:06 p.m. and I'm calling to order the January 28th, 2024 meeting of the Rutland Ad Hoc By-law Committee with Peter Crane and Deirdre Carlson and Norm Anderson present in the room. Welcome, one and all. We are going to continue our proposed bylaw amendment review today. Last time we went through the big presentation, which I don't plan to go through today unless there's time at the end. We covered chapters 1 through 4. We're going into multi-member bodies. Trying to think of the order. Road, public and private ways, natural resources, and the giant catch-all chapter, other matters. Then we're going to discuss the 3 zoning amendment changes that are going to be up for the vote at town meeting also. And if there's time, we'll just start again. Where are you? If people don't mind, I'm going to leave the screen up here so I can see when somebody raises their hand remotely. So there's a little blockage of the screen, but if that's a problem, I can make that go away. Multi-member bodies are exactly that. It's generally appointed committees, but it's any committee or board or council or commission that has a specific bylaw. And there are only a few of these. In the long run, there should be more as we work towards a new charter. I imagine every multi-member body should have its own section of that, whether it's bylaw or charter description, whatever. In any event, most of the multi-member body bylaws are substantially the same as they were before. There are some differences, which I've pointed out before. Are these bullet items? Agricultural Commission, or AgCom, actually had more changes than any other because at a recent town meeting, the town adopted the latest version of Chapter 40, Section 8L in the Mass General Laws, which is the section of the Mass General Law that allows us to have an agricultural commission and to have this bylaw that enables them. So we've added a few things from 8L into this bylaw because there are powers and authorities given to AgCom in that new version of the bylaw. You may remember last time, Chapter 1, Article 2 is appointed committees. So all the committees in town, committees, boards, councils, commissions, they all follow the same basic rules which are laid out there. They used to be laid out in every single multi-member body bylaw. So we stripped out the ones that are in the one generic bylaw. That's what that first bullet point is all about. They're appointed to 3-year terms by the select board, and they elect, every year they elect officers, and there are a suite of these generic rules that go with them. One of the interesting things, the Ad Hoc By-law Committee, as it does its work, references not only the bylaws that we have, we also go through the Mass General Law, either the laws or the regulations, that enable them to make sure that everything we do is synchronized. One of the things that's really interesting, that was interesting to the committee, was that Section 8L in its current form talks about members and not alternate members. So we had a couple of go-arounds with town council about this, and town council's basic opinion is that our bylaw, since it was enacted before the latest version of 8L was enacted by the legislature, our bylaw with alternate members, the alternate member section is grandfathered in, so we get to keep that. So it's still the same size as it's always been, and it has regular members and alternate members to fill in when members are absent. We added a section about coordinating with other bodies or organizations. If you think about the Agricultural Commission's primary duty, they promote agriculture. But to do that, they need to work with state agencies, other town bodies, And other organizations that aren't of the town or of any government, any non-governmental organization, whether it's a conservation area or, I'm sure that just like there's the Mass Association of Conservation Commissioners, there's an association of agricultural commissions, and you want to be able to work with them. So that's what that next bullet means, is coordinate with everyone you need to do your jobs. There's another, if you were to read through all the list of duties, they read fundamentally the same way that they did before, but we added also, they're allowed to do other activities consistent with their purpose, and that language comes almost directly out of Mass General Law. In addition, we incorporated all the powers that Section 8L confers upon the Agricultural Commission. One of the biggest ones is to own land. The Agricultural Commission on its own is allowed to own land, which most groups in a town are not allowed to do. It's normally that town itself, and accepted by the select board or purchased by the select board. But not always. This is one of those cases. Agricultural Commission and Conservation Commission each have, in Mass General Law, the ability to purchase land and to hold it for certain purposes, like for conservation and recreation for Concom, for agricultural purposes in AgCom. 8L says that AgCom is allowed to purchase land for recreational purposes or conservation purposes, but we limited that in our bylaw to conservation for agricultural purposes. Because we didn't want conflicts between which body in the town is supposed to do recreation and conservation. Everything else is basically the way that it is in the current bylaw. Maybe not stated in exactly the same way, but this goes back to consequential changes versus substantive changes. Questions on AgCom? Moving on, the Bylaw Committee. Just like in AgCom, all those terms that were defined there, that are defined in appointed committees bylaw have been removed. There were sections in the Bylaw Committee that were duties of the Select Board. The Select Board has to pass warrant articles with bylaw changes to the Bylaw Committee. But that's a Select Board duty, so that section was moved into the Select Board bylaw and out of the Bylaw Committee bylaw. So that a Bylaw Committee bylaw should only deal with duties of the Bylaw Committee. Each committee should be like that. We added, based on our own recent experience, a duty to review Attorney General decisions. If I go back to the big presentation, there's a section on how bylaws get enacted completely, and after they pass to town meeting, they go to the Attorney General for review, who makes comments, usually, and will accept or reject either portions of the law or the whole thing. There was no place in town today that is obligated to review the Attorney General's decisions. We added it to the Bylaw Committee because more often than not, they were directly involved in the drafting and the passage of it. So understanding what the AG thinks about it is important for writing new law. If a town official wants either a new bylaw or wants to change a bylaw, we felt that it's the Bylaw Committee's duty to do that work, to assist that town official or board or committee, whatever. That way, all the changes should ideally funnel through the Bylaw Committee so that we have, again, a completely consistent view of the law. This next bullet item has to do with sessions just like this, where the Permanent Bylaw Committee, in its current form, its bylaw says that you have to publish 7 days in advance, I believe, in a newspaper and general circulation of the town. That's pretty boilerplate language for this. But people don't read newspapers anymore. And the select board has adopted a policy that says that you don't have to post in newspapers unless the law says you have to. So we're changing the law to say, we're going to the bylaw committee's public information sessions will be posted however the select board says we need to. Finally, part of the town council bylaw says that you don't talk directly to town council because that always costs money. If you send them email, the moment they open the email, they're charging money. The moment they answer the phone, they're charging money. Whether it's a quarter hour base rate, it doesn't matter. And whatever the hourly rate is. The current version of this bylaw says that the bylaw committee gets to directly interact with town council. And after discussions with the select board and town administrator, we decided to back that out, to make the bylaw committee the same as everybody else. You have to go through the select board or the town administrator to talk to town council. The town, let's just assume for a moment it's always the town administrator. That makes the town administrator almost a gatekeeper. But the administrator will have information about everything that's going on with council to know if a question's already been asked and answered. Why have council tell us the same thing twice? And again, I say again, I've had this discussion once today already. If the town administrator says, no, you may not, you can whoever wants to go to council, to refer to council, can absolutely go through the select board as a body. So, bylaw committee doesn't go directly to town council anymore. They go through the TA and or the select board.
About paragraph 7, failure to observe. So if the bylaw committee decides right, wrong, or indifferent, they don't post 1 week in advance, they don't hold the information sent, it still can go to town meeting and boo-hoo for the taxpayers.
I hesitate to say it the way you did, Karen. What I would say is that it's not boo-hoo. It means that it comes to town meeting whether or not the entire process is followed. So if somebody doesn't hold the public information session, then the public information session effectively happens at town meeting. If the bylaw committee hasn't evaluated a bylaw proposal from, I'm just gonna pick on DPW today. If DPW says, here's a bylaw that we really need, so let's just go through it. If the select board doesn't refer to the bylaw committee, or if the bylaw committee doesn't review it, or the bylaw committee isn't complete with it, that doesn't prevent the issue from coming up at town meeting. Citizen petitions are always bizarro anyway.
Yes.
For citizen petitions, there isn't a formal review process as much as there is a look at it so that the bylaw committee can form an opinion and render that opinion at town meeting. We support this, we don't support this bylaw for whatever reason. Other questions on the bylaw committee? Council on Aging. Skip the first one for a second. Remove the membership sections covered elsewhere. Yep, you should be used to that by now. The current bylaw says that the select board shall appoint the appropriate number, I forget, 2 alternate members. Well, what happens if they don't get 2 people who want to be appointed? Well, they can't meet that meeting. They can't meet that section of law. So we changed it from shall appoint to may appoint. And we explicitly say alternate member terms are 1 year. To avoid the confusion of are they 3 years just like the regular members? No, 1 year appointments. Annual, alternate members in, I believe all of our bylaws are 1 year appointments. Now I'll go back to that first one. The first bullet item, I don't remember the wording anymore, it's been too long since I've looked at this, but we expanded the purpose section of the bylaw. Not, well, partially based on what was there already, but we took a lot of section in this, we did a lot of reading of the Mass General Law section that covers councils on aging. And we said, oh, this is what the Council on Aging does, it should go into our bylaw to make clear that we don't have to have everyone read the Mass General Law to understand what a Council on Aging does. Questions on that? Finally, the Earthworks Board, the only words that changed there were the removal of sections that were covered in the appointed committees law. As I said, that's all. There are four and only four bylaws for this today. Also, to say something I said at the last session, there are some multi-member bodies that can fit in different chapters in our book of bylaws. And I've used as my example Finance Committee, because Finance Committee is a multi-member body. They are a bunch of people appointed in town. They are also involved significantly in our financial processes. So the decision of the bylaw committee was to place them in the financial affairs chapter rather than the multi-member bodies chapter, because we would rather put the bylaw for a body based on what they do, not what they are. So it's not that they are a multi-member body, so they could go there, but what their purpose, their fundamental purpose is financial in nature. Same thing with CIPC. Questions on any of the multi-member body stuff?
Well, I'm looking at the old bylaw and I'm, it's just taken some time to figure out exactly what it is you're meaning by removed membership sections in comparison to the new one. It's just a little cumbersome to try to figure out what's been taken out in any amount of expediency here, so. That's all,
Yeah, so Earthworks Board is a particularly mutant board in that it's not just a multi-member body, it's composed of members from different boards in town, different committees. Planning Board, Conservation Commission, Board of Health, Agricultural Commission, and an at-large member. So there are more words in this bylaw for membership than there are in others. Mostly, usually, for even Council on Aging is a little mutant because that is a variable number of members. But Agricultural Commission membership will just say 5 members and 2 alternate members. And not worry about the appointment, appointed to 3-year terms and 1-year terms respectively, or something like that. There are words like that in there now. And everything about electing officers and selecting a clerk, that's all gone from all these bylaws now.
So quickly, I'm being quick, I haven't really studied it. Quickly, it's like you remove sections E, F, and G out of subsection 3 under membership.
Sure.
So why couldn't you have just put that up there, we remove those sections to make it easy for stupid people like me to figure it out?
Because I'm not trying to be that textual, I'm trying to make these descriptive and not factually precise. The whole purpose of this document is to describe, not to list every single change.
So you also took out the section on subsection 4 on officers, question mark?
Because that's all in the appointed committees bylaw.
Okay.
The newest section of the document that Anita handed out today, if you go back to the appointed committees section, it actually lists out in a bit more detail those things that are covered by the bylaw. So multi-member bodies or appointed committees will have to specify how many members there are. Well, but doesn't have to say the appointing authority is if it's the select board, only say it if it's not someone other than that. Only has to say term when it's other than 3 years, and alternate, and in fact, not rotating, staggered 3-year terms. I don't remember all the sections. I wrote it a couple of weeks ago. My finger memory isn't that good anymore. Okay. And also, Barbara, because you have this, if you scroll down to the bottom, that's a description of every section that was changed. Down in the history.
Okay,
Moving on to public and private ways. We currently have a bylaw called highways that we're changing the name to public ways, which mostly says, don't throw junk in the road. Don't throw snow or ice or trash or debris in the road. That's really what it says. The current bylaw says, don't throw that stuff in public streets or squares. But a way is more than just a street. A way is the entirety of is whatever other stuff the town supports, like sidewalks. Today, it is technically legal to block a sidewalk because we don't have a bylaw. We have a bylaw that says don't block streets, but it doesn't say don't block sidewalks. By changing the words to public way or public right-of-way, everything that's a way, that includes sidewalks and trails, and the definition of public way is vast, but we've expanded it so that we think it has more utility. Not that I know that this bylaw is enforced through fine very frequently, if ever. I don't know, that's not that was not a question for the committee.
so I always thought you weren't supposed to park on the sidewalk. There's no bylaw that says you can't park on the sidewalk?
This one right here.
There is no town bylaw today that does that. There might be something in Mass General Law. I really am not an expert in that space. That would be a question, honestly, for the police chief. But in terms of town bylaw, no, there's nothing that says that.
Okay.
Furthermore, we didn't just say, don't put snow or ice in the road and don't block it. It's doing anything to interfere with emergency services or blocking fire hydrants. Anything that does that is, this bylaw has been extended to that. So if you block a fire hydrant, you have a whole nother fine that because you're actually blocking emergency services and you're interfering with access to the hydrant, that's actually 2 separate violations.
You can't put a basketball hoop in front of, something like that.
That would be a very bad idea. Well, the other thing is that I mentioned all of don't put things in the road. That includes your car. If you have a narrow road and you're parked in the road and an emergency vehicle can't get through, you've caused a big problem. Humana, I could talk about no parking in the winter. I could talk about, I'm just gonna say, don't block the road with anything. Questions on that bylaw? All right, scenic roads. The current bylaw has a lot of very specific things you're allowed to do and not allowed to do. But that's not keeping up with the times. General Laws, Chapter 40, Section 16C deals with scenic roads and the definitions of scenic roads. That all of our law and the practices, they need to conform to that. And so rather than listing everything you're allowed to do and not allowed to do, unless we specifically wanted to highlight it, we're just saying refer to that Mass General Law, which can change as much as the legislature chooses and isn't subject to our bylaw process.
So who gave you the 25-cent word that no one's gonna know what it means?
Which one?
Appurtenances or?
Appurtenance?
Yeah, okay, yeah. I mean,
That's a word
that is a legal term, so that somebody has to go look it up in the dictionary.
Right. An appurtenance is everything that's not the thing itself. An appurtenant structure to a house is a shed, or a pool house.
I got that, I looked it up in the dictionary,
Yeah, that's
but I
right.
mean, you're making it difficult.
An appurtenance element to the road is either the sidewalk, is the stormwater system, is the sewer and water mains. Those are all appurtenances when they're owned by the town.
Peter,
Sir?
how many scenic roads do we have in town?
Too many.
6. Hold on, I can answer that question. Give me just a moment.
I can list them, but
Because I have it.
I don't think most people think of a scenic road as the highway.
No.
They don't think of it as these little side roads that can be scenic.
From May 14, 1975, Brenton, Barrack Hill, Susquehanna. And then May 17, 2008, Chernock Hill, Hillside Road? I thought it was F. Doesn't matter, I get confused about these things. Intervale Road and Muskapog. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 if I'm counting correctly.
Okay. Thank you.
So Peter, last week you said that the police are able to intervene if they see a violation of this of a bylaw.
Yes.
Any bylaw.
Correct.
So if the police drive by and see, let's say, a builder removing trees and or stone walls on a scenic road.
Sure.
They're allowed to stop them.
Yes.
They don't have to go through the building inspector, they don't have to go through the planning board, they can stop them immediately.
Well, let's be really clear about that. The police do not, to my knowledge, have the authority to issue a cease and desist order.
Okay.
But they have the ability to fine and in some cases arrest individuals. So they can issue a fine, they can give them the ticket right there. And even stand there and watch them not do it again and drive away, which is as close to as good as you're going to be. When it comes to issuing, in this case, a cease and desist order for these things, that has to come from an appropriately authorized town official, which is either going to be the tree warden or the building inspector.
Okay.
Now, I would hope, above all hopes, that the officer who issued a citation, or at least chased somebody off, would inform the appropriate official in town to take further action.
Not that those things would happen in town, I'm just saying
No,
that just in case.
Completely out of your imagination, I understand that. Okay. Yes?
There doesn't seem to be a clear definition of what a scenic road is. Either that or I'm not picking it up.
You're right, there is not a clear definition of what a scenic road
Like a
is. It is
scenic road
road,
shall be a road such and such, such and such, such and such.
a road designated to be scenic by the town, that's all it is. Which therefore limits
Where does it
some of
say
the
that?
actions. That's mass general law, it's not us.
Okay. That answers that question.
Were it not for mass general law, we wouldn't even be allowed to write this bylaw.
And we wouldn't have it if it wasn't for Virginia Redfield.
Yeah.
I had already moved to town when was proposed. I think it was the first town meeting I went to.
I remember that town meeting.
There is, I believe, a problem in the current bylaw, in fact, the committee believes, I'm gonna say I a lot, and I really mean the committee, cause we act as a body, it's not just me. The current bylaw, the way it works is somebody makes an application to designate a road as scenic, or for that matter, to designate a scenic road as no longer scenic. Wait, this is application. Is this application for work to do it? So, once it's designated as scenic, then you need permission from a town authority to do certain sets of work. The amount of stone wall you're allowed to destroy, the number of trees you can pull down off a scenic road, those are limited by the bylaw. And you have to make an application to the right person, the right authority, either the tree warden or the planning board, to do that work. The current bylaw says that 60 days after application, the answer has to be given. All too frequently, that's not enough time in practice, because let's just say you're talking to the planning board. Well, the planning board meets every 2 or 3 weeks, so you're rapidly eating into the time which you have to give an answer by the law. And then whether it's the tree warden or the planning board, there's a public hearing about whatever changes someone wants to make along the scenic road. So we changed it, we took it away from 60 days after application, and we made it 30 days after the close of the public hearing. Public hearing, people speak, the neighbor, the abutters, anybody who's interested comes and speak to the planning board about tearing down this section of stone wall. Then the planning board thinks about it, someone writes a decision, they have 30 days after the close of the public hearing.
Well, how many days do they have between the receipt of the application and the public hearing?
I don't remember that there's a specific time, but I will say the normal practice is at the next practical meeting. If it comes in too close to the next meeting, they're gonna put it off one.
And then the application goes to the, who?
It either goes to the planning board for stone walls, or it goes to the tree warden for the cutting of trees. That hasn't changed, that's just the same way it is right now. And then if they're cutting trees and removing stone walls, you're gonna have a single hearing that takes care of both bodies at the same time, blah, blah, blah. Again, that's all in the law today. The current bylaw only references removing scenic road designation once, I believe. And we've sort of brought that out to say, you can not only say it is scenic, if things change enough, it can be made unscenic. And so all the restrictions of a scenic road would no longer exist on that road. So somebody wants to add scenic road designation or remove scenic road designation. There is a public information meeting, not a public hearing, because hearings have other specific rules that we're not gonna talk about right now. But we made it a public information session where the public's allowed to speak and give their voice and their opinions as to whether or not this road should be made scenic or that road should be made no longer scenic. But we added the requirement for a public information session. That was not a requirement right now. The current bylaw specifically says that once the designation request is put in, it must be acted upon by town meeting. Except there's a lot that goes on between somebody wanting something on the town meeting warrant and it getting there. Now, because this is a town bylaw and the select board are the people who place warrant articles and the select board is an elected body, there are limits to what the general bylaws can do to direct the actions of the select board. Therefore, the language it used to say was, which must be acted upon by town meeting, is instead the planning board, I think, someone, whichever, oh, that's right, there are three different bodies that you can go through to make a scenic road designation change. Conservation, historical, and planning. You go through one of them and they basically, assuming they go along with it, they will request the select board to place a warrant article to make the change. Current bylaw says that the scenic road designation takes place with a simple majority of town meeting voters. We decided that it was better to have a 2/3 supermajority if you're going to remove the scenic road designation.
So it's a simple majority to put it in and 2/3 to take it out?
Yes.
It's easier to put it in than it is to take it out?
Yep.
Can you explain why?
Because we believe there's, that have, the town having voted to take an action, that you're basically asking the town to undo an action. And it is our opinion that the threshold is higher to undo an action than it is to do it, to take an action. Philosophically.
I think too, Peter, the reason for undoing it has to be that strong,
It has to be so clear and obvious.
that it requires a 2/3, that clear.
So all these changes in the bylaws are gonna require a 2/3?
That was a specific change that we believe, this is a specific change of town action that we believe requires a 2/3 majority.
Well, at this town meeting, it's a simple majority to change all of these bylaws.
Yes.
And that's per Mass General
That's right,
law.
Mass General Law says
I
to
get it.
change it.
I'm asking
change
the
a bylaw,
question,
yeah.
cause it's, I knew it was a simple majority, I knew it. But I just am like, okay, but if, like, I'm thinking if a majority of the people who live on that scenic road wanted to get rid of that scenic road for whatever reason, they should be able to empower enough people to be there for a simple majority, because it's, I don't understand why you need 2/3 versus a majority.
Again, this is undoing a specific action of town meeting. That's basically it. That's what we believe as a committee.
Okay, but like moving the town meeting, the specific change that you want to move to, proposed for the town meeting, that was voted on by a town meeting.
I agree,
And we're gonna
but
do a simple majority to change it.
that's right, but we're changing not just that.
I get it, but what I'm saying is
And again, Mass General Law says a bylaw changes a simple majority of a general bylaw. We don't get to not have that.
I get it, I'm just asking the question.
Plus, we changed it back to where it was for years, so the same argument could have been said for when it got changed.
Let's not go through the arguments
Right.
about.
But no, I'm just saying, I just think it's kind of different, that simple majority can be putting it in, but it takes 2/3 of it to take it out.
To pave an otherwise unpaved scenic road today, the town can just act. I'm not saying it would, I'm saying it can. So one of the changes is that planning board needs to have a public hearing to make that change, to enable that change. To pave the road. When there's a public hearing for a change for the stone walls and trees. The bylaw today says you have to notify abutters within 100 feet of the property. We expanded that to 300 feet because that is much more consistent with the rest of the laws that we deal with. We are putting into law communications within the town. That when there are applications and hearings and decisions, all the different bodies who could be involved by law are notified. And finally, it doesn't say it in the current bylaw, so we put it in. When someone takes an action they shouldn't have, or is applying to make a change, but let's just say they're destroying some amount of stone wall, and the planning board decides that they need to rebuild this other portion of stone wall as a condition of allowing this destruction. That's a possibility. That's compensatory action. You're either compensating for something you want to do or something that you have done that wasn't legal. Nowhere does it say in the law that the requirements for compensation are in writing. So we added that. Questions about scenic roads?
No, just a comment. I think it's interesting about the pavement when you're in here, because when this bylaw first went in way back when, that was one of the big things that was always said. You can't, once you make it a scenic road, you can't pave it.
Right.
And that, obviously, there was nothing in there that actually said that, but
That's
that's,
That was
everybody was led
everybody's
to
perception,
believe that and not make changes on scenic roads. And that was a lot of the reasons why I'm sure people voted on it, but.
Well, what I will say is Mass General Law today has something about paving a scenic road. And so that's one of the reasons, one of the things that led us to put this specific element in the law.
Interesting.
I'm not gonna say it wasn't there when the original scenic road bylaw was passed. I don't know. I don't track changes to Mass General Law that closely.
No, I
but-
understand it. I'm not asking, I'm just saying it.
No.
That's what was said at the meeting, and
Yeah.
everybody was told that.
And you are,
Right.
whoever said that was absolutely dead wrong. There is nothing stopping the town from paving a scenic road.
Because after that meeting, a particular person said, "This is great for me, now I don't have to pave that road."
Now, I'm sure they believe it.
Or something thereof.
Anita, to your knowledge, have we had any requests to change back?
No.
From a scenic?
Not any of these original roads.
No. Okay.
Previously, yes.
Yeah, a year or so ago, there was a real controversy about adding a road, and that didn't happen.
Converting back to it.
Right.
Definitely.
Anita Lynn just joined.
Oh, okay.
Hi, Lynn.
Hi.
Welcome. I hope I didn't keep you waiting for long. I apologize if I did.
A little bit.
So you heard scenic roads.
No, she didn't.
Oh,
She
she
just came on board. So we just finished scenic roads.
Oh dear.
Unless there are other comments or questions. There we go. You wanna put a driveway, you're building a new house, you would want a driveway. You have to get a driveway permit or a curb cut permit. That's already been there. I don't remember what it said in the past, but we explicitly say it's the Department of Public Works that issues the permit. And it's also important to note, it was never in the law, we added it, saying that if it's not a town road, the town doesn't have jurisdiction, you don't have to get permission from the town. It generally means the state. If you're on 122 or 122A, you've got to get permission from the state to cut the curb. And or remove guardrail, whatever.
So that's new.
That element is new. It's always been law, but we put it in there to tell people, to inform them, basically, anybody who reads the law, hey, there are roads in town that are not jurisdictional to the. And the feds actually own some property up, and I don't think there are any roads there, so that becomes not a problem for us today. But that provision has always been there. Whoever owns the road has the permitting authority for that road.
Can I just have a question there?
Yes, sir.
Why did, and this is just because I'm curious. You know, no person shall build or construct between private driveway and any town road. So what was the reason to specify or add in 56, Palmagussit Road, Maple Avenue, East County Road?
To list the roads that are clearly owned by the town. Some people think because it has a route number that it's a state road, and that's not correct. Palmagussit Road and Maple Ave, even though they're Route 56, are town roads, except for that itty bitty section where it jogs across Main Street.
I think that's town road too, but.
No, Main Street is a state road. Main Street.
Well, there are sections of Main Street that are not state,
Oh, really?
yes.
I don't know,
I'm
you gotta
pretty
go
sure
back
there
and
are.
read that, but anyways. But I'm just
Yeah.
curious, because all the
Right.
town roads are town roads, that's the only thing I'm saying.
Right, so we.
Except for, like you said, the ones that are the numbered state roads, but.
Right.
I mean, okay, no, I'm just curious, that's all.
It's fine. Bylaw to establish an official names for streets, which we are renaming to street names. Which, back when this bylaw was originally written and there was no official list of street names, the town formed a committee to establish names of streets. And that list was adopted at town meeting, right? I believe.
Yeah, at
Yeah.
1898, I think it was.
So the current bylaw has all this stuff about the committee that named the streets originally. That's not useful anymore. Because we're never going to do that again. So we stripped that out. Street names are the authority of the planning board. Which means if it's a subdivision, well, subdivisions all go through the planning board, so that makes sense. If the town decided to build a new road as a bypass between places, the name of it has to be decided by the planning board. But the planning board is required to consult with the town clerk, the assessor, and public safety to ensure that that the name isn't too close to one that already exists. In Bryce Lemon, they wanted to call it Wildwood, maybe? That is now Oakley Drive?
No, they wanted, no, it was one of the ones down off of Miles, Millbrook.
Millbrook.
Yeah.
That's right. So it was a Millbrook.
Close, yeah.
It was too close to a street that exists, and so that actually had to be changed from the original plan that was put in.
And there was actually in Bryce Lemon, there was an east and a west, I think East Wyndham and West Wyndham. And the post office, the head of the post office in Boston strongly objected to that, so they changed those.
So now the current bylaw just says it's under the authority of the planning board. Now the planning board has to consult with other groups that are in the know about public safety and about clarity of naming. Current bylaw talks about when a street is named, that the town's responsible for getting the names registered in the registry of deeds. But those are mostly subdivision actions, and so they are actions of a developer, not actions of the town. And a new job for the town clerk's office. The town clerk maintains the official list of streets for the town. Both public and private ways, by the way. You can't have a name without going through the planning board. Doesn't matter whose land it is, in order to ensure safety and clarity, that there is a single process for doing it, no matter if it's a public way or a private way. So all of the streets in Harmony Place, all those roads, should go through the planning board for approval. In the same way that Bryce Lemon already has, because it's also intended that those will in time become, and some of them already have, become public ways.
And the clerk's office has always maintained the list of private and public roads, but this makes it
It makes an official
solidified
duty.
it, that it's a duty.
If there were a town clerk bylaw, that's where that last sentence would belong, not in the establishing uniform names of streets. It'd be a duty of the town clerk.
Or if there's ever a charter.
Anything else about names of streets? Bylaw to establish a uniform system of numbering houses and other structures, being renamed structure numbers. Unlike the planning board that defines, who defines the names of streets, the town clerk assigns numbers to structures. Today's bylaw is every 100 feet of roadway is a new number. We are changing that to 50 feet because of our zoning regs. We are not suggesting that the town renumber every street on every road to get in conformance with that. We're not saying that. We're saying, once this is in effect, it's every 50 feet instead of every 100 feet for assigning a new number. And the town clerk already has a mechanism for dealing with there are too many numbers for this distance to be assigned. The town clerk is required to notify other government agencies, the post office, when a number's been assigned, along with everything else in town. Town clerk already has to talk to the assessor.
Yeah, we also
example.
notify, like
safety
911,
and-
state.
Oh, state 911, I thought about that one, right. The current bylaw says that numerals shall be black or in a contrasting color. Well, if you have a black siding and black numbers, that's in conformance with the bylaw today. So we changed the wording that numerals shall be in a color contrasting with, I forget what the exact words we put down there, but contrasting with the background, basically.
I thought it always was.
No. The color contrasting was an or.
Well, wouldn't that make sense?
Oh, I agree it makes sense, but as I said, black on black is legal today.
No, I'm just saying, or if a contrast, or so you have a black house, you're gonna have a contrasting color.
You should, but the bylaw doesn't require that today.
I think it did, cause I wrote that way back when we voted for it, so that's why it was.
It's so you could see which number you needed to go to when there was an accident.
Exactly.
I agree it's what makes all the sense in the world. I agree with that. But my reading of the current bylaw was that it is not a requirement.
Because you could have a dark brown house and have black letters, and then that wouldn't have made any sense.
Is it contrasting?
No.
That's an opinion, it's contrasting color, it's gonna be, whatever. I don't,
Well, I'll tell you, at 2:00 in the morning on a dark and rainy night, as you're driving in the ambulance and you're trying to find a house, that white numbers on a black house makes a big difference.
Finally, today, the bylaw says that the structure owner or occupant is responsible for installing and maintaining the legibility of the numbers. It's the owner. It's always the owner. It's never the occupant. At the end of the day, in Mass General Law, the owner of the property is responsible for everything that happens on that property, any violation of any law. And if the occupant wants a different number, or wants not a different number, that's not valid, but wants a different color scheme, okay, but he's gotta go through the owner anyway. Certainly should.
So are you changing the 6-inch requirement?
No,
Okay.
6-inch.
Peter,
sir.
number. Can that number be written out?
Yes, you will find in other places a structure number is a series of digits followed by sometimes an alphanumeric designation. But they can be expressed as numerals, which includes written out words. Oh yeah, we've spent some time looking at definitions of things and.
Because there are houses that have it all written out
Lots of them.
78 and that kind of stuff.
Absolutely.
Yep. And there is a 1 Sassawana that's spelled out.
Yeah.
Of course, Karen had a unique one when she and Tim bought their house. The previous owner must have been given the numbers and they put the number as 146, and that's on the opposite side of the street. That 6 was supposed to be a 9.
Yeah, oh yeah, that was a huge problem, yeah, oh yeah.
Oh, I believe it.
My mail was going everywhere, I'm like, what's the problem here? This is what we got.
I'm glad we got that changed.
Yep.
doesn't the old one say numerals?
Yeah, if you look, there are places where it says numbers and there are places where it says numerals. When it talks about displaying, you're displaying numerals, which allows the script, the written out place. But there are places where we define things as numbers. Because at the baseline, these are structure numbers, which are expressed as numerals.
But in the grand scheme of things, if you don't have 6-inch digits on your home, who's gonna go around and catch you? Really, it's only a public safety smart for the person who's there in case you need the ambulance or the fire department. I mean, that's the way I look at it, or the police department.
So
You want to be able to find you.
It should be numerals. When somebody's driving up there in a fire truck or an ambulance, they look at the number and they see 126. It's not 126, blah, 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 'cause- okay.
this is one of those freedom of expression things where people are free to express themselves in a variety of ways.
I think it's a freedom of getting the emergency vehicle to your house. I think the original one was numerals, and it said numerals so that you put, there was never any time that I know of I let anybody put up written out numbers.
Numerals
Always a
numerals definitionally includes written out
I'm just saying,
English text.
well, it should be so that it's so it's a number that you can read, whether it's a 1 or a 1,040, 600 or whatever, but.
I think the fire chief has the authority to fine people that don't, like, not many people, a lot of people in town don't have 6-inch numbers, which I think if you drove around, there, you could,
Now,
not a lot of fines.
that reminds me of something, there was a conversation the committee had with, I think this was the select board, where we talked about mailboxes. And is posting on the mailbox, putting the number just in the mailbox at the end of the driveway sufficient? The answer is, if it's 6 inches tall, which is the hard part to meet with mailbox numbers, then it is technically, I believe, could be considered legal based on the wording of the bylaw that we have today. How it's posted.
No, it says, the current bylaw says on or near the front door.
But what happens when the front door is not visible from the roadway, then you need to put it on,
Well, you should, but that's not what it was.
that,
I
the
know.
current bylaw has that provision in it,
Correct.
where, yes, if it's visible from the road, it's supposed to be.
No, it didn't say visible from, it said on or near the front door. And then it says if you can't see it from the road, then
Yeah.
it should have a post outside somewhere so you can see it.
Right.
Right.
And that's
So-
why you'll see a lot of these multiple driveways
Oh, yeah.
we got that are allowed with posts there so you know which direction to go in.
And all I'm saying is that the current bylaw and I believe the new bylaw would both allow numerals on a mailbox as long as they meet the other requirements, because the mailbox is on a post. So that meets the post requirement if it's visible and contrasting from the
I
mailbox
didn't say it
proper.
didn't.
Yeah.
I don't disagree there, that, yes.
Doesn't the post office require you to have the number on the mailbox?
Yes, but they don't have a 6-inch
No,
requirement.
I know, I'm just
Yep.
asking, doesn't, I was like,
Yep.
Yeah, but you also have places where you've got 4 or 5 mailboxes all in
Oh,
one
yeah.
spot,
Yeah.
and it doesn't, you know,
Tom,
Yes, sir.
why did they start with the 6-inch? I'm thinking of the siding of a house. Some of the sidings are 4 inches, so if you go 6 inches, you're crossing over and bending it, that could break. Why did they go a 6-inch? Was
So
that the original clapboard back then?
Yep. Oh, no, that was the original size of the numbers, that's what I put in there, 6 inch, so you could see it.
It's legibility from a distance is fundamentally it, and there's plenty of science about how large something at a given distance needs to be legible to a person with usual vision.
And I researched a lot of places, and most places around say 6 inch. Some don't. There are dozens of them out there that say 4 inches or 5 inch, whatever, but the majority of the ones that I looked at that seemed to be well-written and smart ones said 6 inch, so.
I think you're right, Anita. I think we drive, but you aren't gonna see a lot of 6-inch signs.
Anything else on structure numbers? Moving on. Next chapter, natural resources. Start with earth removal. It's the easiest one of all. We're not modifying anything in it. We're not touching it. And we sure as heck don't want this bylaw to be passed through the Attorney General's office again, because they've already given us noise about it. The Earthworks Board is working on a new bylaw to replace this. And so the bylaw committee, the Ad Hoc By-law Committee, spending time on this bylaw was not a good use of time. Stormwater. It is a very, very complicated and long, it's not the longest bylaw that we have, but it's long and it's complicated and it's process-driven. We changed the structure of the bylaw to make it more clear so that there's a flow and a process that goes through the entire process. Here's how you apply, there's a permit, there are penalties and things that the town can do if you illicitly connect to the stormwater system. Now, who here knows the difference between sewer and stormwater?
well, sewer is going down to Blackstone and stormwater gets drained out to
To a nearby
Robin.
wetland?
yeah.
No, to a nearby wetland,
Yeah.
as far as we're concerned. That's really it. So we have separate systems, one for sewer, one for stormwater. If you go to older systems, like I grew up in Brockton and they had a combined system that did sewer and stormwater, all kinds of problems with that. The EPA really hates that. So this is talking only about connections to the stormwater system, which is any storm drains in the road.
Gullies, brooks, that kind of stuff.
Yep, all the places that surface water flows. And to be more clear, in fact, the title's been changed a little bit to stormwater : illicit discharges and connections. We used to say, don't throw bad stuff in the street, don't let it flow into the storm system, and don't connect to the stormwater system without permission. That's all that says. We got 8 pages of that.
It's also because of the new regulations that we have to monitor.
Well, the bylaw that we have conforms fairly well to a section of those regs. There are more stormwater bylaws coming. Perhaps in May, perhaps in November, we'll see. Current bylaw talks about the select board as the authority, which is 100% wrong. Stormwater is a public work, and therefore the Board of Public Works has authority, even though it's the same people as as the select board.
So how does this handle the person who's pumping their cellar water out into their front yard and it's draining out into the street and running down into a storm drain?
This gives the DPW authority to find that person,
Okay.
depending upon what's in it. I mean, that's the other side of it. It's not just pumping it. Water flow as just water almost doesn't matter. Illicit discharges are things other than water. So if you've had an oil leak in your basement, and when you run the sump, you're pumping out water and oil, it's the and oil that gets you into trouble. Or debris, things like that. If it's just water, it's fine, because then it's just stormwater, surface water.
So I could take my sump pump and hose it out into the storm drain in front of my house?
If you can be sure that it's only water. And this is where it gets tricky.
Not that I do that, I'm just,
I have seen enough pipes partially buried. I think about, every time I drive down Glenwood, which is virtually every day, I see water flowing out of pipes on Glenwood Road. And I know that. And it drains directly into the swale that goes down and goes towards the rail trail. Any that actually stays in the swale that doesn't go out onto Glenwood and freeze, that's
but
most of those, the ones that I've seen have all been subsurface drains, so everything's already strained out of it, so it's just water that's coming through. But again, sump pumps have this tendency to pump stuff that's not just water. And that's all, by the way, in the law today. That's I don't have anything here. The law today says that. You may remember that I said that one of the duties of the permanent bylaw committee, when it gets formed, will be to review Attorney General decisions. Well, the Ad Hoc By-law Committee reviewed Attorney General decisions from when the bylaws were passed initially and amended. And one of the things that the AG's office said is, don't you dare apply this bylaw to any work that is a statutory mandate of a government agency. Their words. So, we made a clear exemption so the AG's office won't complain about that this time.
oh, so a government agency can dump contaminated water into?
You betcha they can, if it's a statutory mandate. That is to say, if.
That's so typical.
Yeah. Yes.
And don't worry, we as a town will have to clean
And
it
we will
before
have
it
to
goes.
pay
That's right.
for it.
That's right.
And then we'll have to clean it
Well,
before it
Well,
goes.
actually, that's all, who would be required to clean it would probably be the government agency, although that would almost certainly require court action to make that happen, but yeah, there are
Town
ways around
pays
it.
for it.
At the end of the day, town pays for it for at least a long time. Questions about stormwater? Okay. Water use restrictions, it's a bylaw that exists today. The Ad Hoc By-law Committee started with the most recent model bylaw, which changed a lot of structure, but not a huge amount of content. And it adds, it's, so I said, adds many details. I didn't write them down and I probably should have, but details about the notification process when DEP tells us something or we tell DEP something, and how the town is notified, and what needs to be in the notice. Those are all new specific details based on the model bylaw. Okay. And that's natural resources today. I know more bylaws are coming, but they're not here, and they sure aren't for consideration right now.
So if it's the town that establishes like water restrictions. In this,
It's more complicated than that, because if the DEP comes up with a restriction, they will say what the restrictions are going to be. If the town decides the restriction is necessary, the town defines the restrictions.
well, who is the DEP to be?
The DEP has its definition of drought taken from, anybody know? Quinnipiac River. The height of Quinnipiac River defines state of drought for much, but not all, of Worcester County. So however Quinnipiac River is running is going to impact what the DEP says we must implement for water use restrictions
And the Quinnipiac River is where?
in Worcester.
It flows through Holden.
Yes, it does flow
Oh.
through Holden.
It's right over there.
Oh, there's a lot of things right over there.
That's sure it is.
If it's deep right now, we can float down and see how it works. Cause I know Joe used to tell us all the time, it's not him that puts in the water
That's right.
restricted, he gets told that he has to do it, so.
Exactly
It's
right.
gonna be no different, Chris will now be told by them,
Right. The DEP says, hey, DPW, here's what you have to do.
yeah.
Now, let's also be clear, really clear about this. This impacts public water supply customers only. If you're on your own well, the town can't tell you anything. You run out of, if you drain your aquifer from your well, hey, you're on your own anyway.
I'm glad you brought that up, Peter, because that's not really defined in here in terms of people understanding that if you're APR, for example, and you're not on sewer, or you have a well, you're not, doesn't matter, no restriction there.
Then neither the DEP nor the town have the legal authority to place restrictions on your use of water. And it does say that somewhere in the bylaw. It does actually list them as public water user consumer, public water consumer, something like that. Other questions or comments? Moving on to animal control. Animal control was a needlessly long bylaw in that it repeated a lot of what was said in Mass General Law. What's the benefit of saying that most of the things that are said in Mass General Law, unless you're trying to stress something in particular, there's not a lot of value to it. I mean, there's a clarification, but the problem is Mass General Law changes, and therefore our ability to regulate certain behaviors or functions will change. So if it duplicated Mass General Law, it's out, basically. And one of the first things we removed were all the definitions. Because some of the definitions conflicted with Mass General Law, which is going to be nothing more than a headache. So instead, we said, take the definitions over there from Mass General Law, what, chapter 140, section 137, or whatever. The current bylaw has a significant legal problem in it, and if we had ever been challenged on it, we would have lost. The current bylaw says that you don't, okay, there are many different classifications of kennels. And one of those classifications is a personal kennel, your individual kennel for your personal dogs. Not for sale, not for show, not for any of that. The current bylaw says that the current general animal control, the current animal control bylaw says that a personal kennel does not require a special permit from the zoning board of appeals. The problem is that the current zoning bylaw specifically says that requires for all kennels a special permit from the zoning board of appeals. Now, at town meeting, we plan to take care of this in 2 steps. One is this bylaw, the other one is zoning bylaw. And we'll talk about the zoning bylaw later, but I think we simplified the language by saying kennels are allowed to be placed in conformance with zoning bylaw. So that we didn't even try to the general bylaw should never, ever talk about zoning issues. Because zoning law trumps general bylaw, always. If they're in conflict, zoning wins, every single time. Which means that had somebody put in for a personal kennel and somebody said, you need a ZBA permit, a permit from the ZBA, well, this bylaw says it doesn't. Zoning says it does, so it does. Current bylaw has a personal kennel for up to 10 dogs. And then basically, if you have more than 10 dogs, you need another personal kennel license. We stripped all that out. It's just a personal kennel license.
Yep.
Theoretically, you could have 100 dogs, but there's always ACO, the animal control officer has to inspect all kennels. So if you have a personal kennel with 10 dogs, you not only need a kennel, you need your space has to be adequate and safe for the number of dogs that you have.
And Peter, it's 5 dogs that,
Oh, it's 5. Oh, well, that's true, you're right.
To
It's
personal.
anything up to 4, you don't need through 4, you don't need a kennel. Fewer than 5, you don't need a kennel. 5 to 10, you need a personal kennel license. And then for each group of 10, you need another personal kennel license. Simplify it. You get a personal kennel license. The number of dogs that are safe and sanitary for you to house is what you may have. Current bylaw talks about when someone's notified that their kennel has failed, says that you have 10 days to fix it. The animal control officer will tell you how long you have to fix the conditions. That'll be part of the orders that come through. So we removed the explicit 10-day limit. Nuisance dogs. This actually went through a significant rework with legal review. Nuisance dogs and dangerous dogs are pretty much defined in Mass General Law, but not very well. So our bylaw tried to define conditions that would make a dog a nuisance dog. Except that the only way to declare a dog a nuisance dog by Mass General Law is to hold a public hearing. So you can't just declare a dog a nuisance dog without a public hearing. So the animal control officer does not have the authority to declare a dog a nuisance. You have to go to the select board, have a complaint, and go through that public hearing process. However, these 3 functions, dog not a leash, dog poops everywhere and the owner doesn't pick it up immediately, or the dog barks too much and too much is defined in the law, that those are still finable offenses, but they don't define the dog as a nuisance. In the current bylaw, they define the dog as a nuisance, but that's not legal.
Okay, so a dangerous dog is defined in MGL?
Yes.
Okay.
And in effect, it just means that you still need a hearing to declare a dog dangerous, just like you need a public hearing to declare a
But
dog
the
a
definition for
nuisance.
dangerous dog is in, okay.
Yeah, and it's pretty much, if it attacks another animal or a person, are the biggest ones. There's some weirdo language in there about attacking any domestic animal, but some of those words I haven't dug into the very bottom of. I just let Mass General Law be Mass General Law.
Okay, so now, my pet peeve, the pooper scooper. What is the fine? How do you go about getting somebody fined? What are the definitions of, is that part of this?
This does not clarify
not
that
seeing
very
it?
well at all.
Because I,
Personal story. I live on a small road, Nate's Way, and it's a few hundred feet cul-de-sac. And every few days, a person walks a couple of golden retrievers. And each time after that, there's something left behind. The problem is that an enforcement officer fundamentally needs to see the offense to ticket or to fine. So to have this person fined, my going to the animal control officer or police officer would do no good. The town is not gonna run DNA tests on excrement to see which dog, because they need to also know what dogs to compare it to and have their DNA. That's not going to happen. I would need to have some explicit video showing it, where the person allowed the dog to do its business and then walk away. And it's up to the animal control officer to determine if that is sufficient evidence, or if the animal control officer needs to explicitly see it. It doesn't make it very clear for lots of reasons. But if I had a Ring doorbell and I used it to do that, I would believe that that person could be fined, assuming that we could properly identify the owner or keeper of the dog.
Get Tommy a comfortable chair to sit on the porch.
oh, it's not in front of my house.
Oh, because I was gonna say, just sit him out there, you're
No,
all
because,
set.
because if I sit out there and somebody across the street, I've done this.
Yeah.
They've walked down the street, the dog has pooped and walked away from it, and I've hollered across the street, aren't you gonna pick that up?
Yeah, and they keep
And,
walking.
and they, no, this guy was duly embarrassed. It was somebody I know, and, oh, I don't have a plastic bag. I went in the house and I got one for him.
That's called bad planning.
I mean, I walk on the sidewalks. I love the new sidewalks that aren't dangerous anymore, and last week, on one walk, 5 dog poops.
On the sidewalk.
Close enough to the sidewalk that if it was a kid walking, not paying attention, they would have stepped in it. And on the sidewalk, yes, I see it regularly on the sidewalk and people just walk away from it. So I would just love to see something in our bylaws that would.
It's hard to strengthen it because this sufficiency of evidence is a legal concept that we all have to sort of go along with. We don't get to say, I just know it was that dog. That's insufficient. As I say, would video be sufficient? I would hope so, but I don't know. I will say I'm sorry, yeah? No? Okay. One other thing. Rutland has a leash law right now. It has had ever since the animal control bylaw was passed in, I'd have to look at whatever year that was, 2008?
More like 12. The state we did in 12 and it took, we
Okay.
had enacted it
12,
a year
13,
or so.
14.
Yep.
We've had a leash law that long. But town council completely rewrote the section on leash and actually includes the word leash in it. It is a much stronger leash restriction. Other questions on animal control?
No, but I would love to get that, so I just would love to see something where people would
Do what they're supposed to
do
do.
what they're supposed to do, yeah. Well, they walk up Sunnyside and I've done that too. I've seen people let their dogs and I've gone out there. Makes me the witch of the neighborhood, doesn't it?
All right, we've been at this an hour and a half.
You're happy she does it though, cause you don't wanna pick it up, so don't worry about it.
Based on the last meeting, it was suggested we break it about the halfway point, we're about the halfway in. So we're gonna make it a 10-minute break, how does that sound?
It's good.
Go get something to drink, something to eat. We have 3 restrooms. Just not on the sidewalk.
Unless you clean it up.
Yeah, right.
Peter? On the dog defecates but owner not picked up, what if it's not the owner who's walking the dog?
Well, it's owner or keeper.
Oh, okay.
The law says owner or keeper throughout. The Ad Hoc By-law Committee took our current door-to-door solicitation and peddling bylaw, made a bunch of changes, and then there was the question that came up about the fingerprint bylaw, which is quite frankly a horrible mess and is almost certainly unenforceable if we were ever taken to court on it, for certain sections of it anyway. And we combined them into a single bylaw, and we sent it off to legal review. And town council said, why don't you try this new model bylaw instead? Which is their way of saying, no, you need to do something very different. So the Ad Hoc By-law Committee's out of town for this town meeting. We're out of time, excuse me, for this town meeting. So we're not gonna be able to do all the work that needs to be done to modify the model and to integrate all the fingerprint background check stuff that the town wants in there. As a result, we are modifying neither of those bylaws. They are staying exactly as they are today. Again, if we don't let the Attorney General's office review them, the Attorney General's office can complain about the content of what we have today. So moving on to,
Okay, wait a second, I'm just trying to find my place here. So, door-to-door this, what's in here is what's in here.
yes,
This is the current, this is the new, okay,
yep. So the new is really the old.
okay.
That's to say what
For,
we are proposing for Article 3 and Section,
for
Articles 2 and 3.
and fingerprinting.
That's right, those are not being touched
Okay.
at all.
Yeah,
Now,
just
at all,
making sure.
I have to put the itty bitty asterisk, there are no changes to the bylaw, but we're putting bylaw history in, but that's not part of the bylaw, that's editorial text is what the AG's office calls it. So the fact that we're adding the history just means we're adding that, but it's not changing one word of either bylaw.
And sadly, we spent a lot of time on those two before.
So moving on to what we are now calling emergency entry systems. Current bylaw basically says, if you're a business or you're a large occupancy residence, not a hotel, that's a bad example, but a rental condo or a rental series of 30 units, that the fire department needs to get into that building in an emergency and they don't want to break down doors. So you have to provide a mechanism, you have to provide the keys for entry to the building and all the way into whatever fire systems are installed in the building. That's pretty much what the current one says. Fire chief asked us to change to use the new model bylaw. Now, for those of you who don't know, I didn't say this earlier when talking about models. The state, some portion of the state with interest in a law tries to write one that covers all the basic conditions of a bylaw, and they present that to say, here is your new model. Your bylaw should look a lot like this. So what we did is we took the most recent model and brought all that stuff into into the now emergency entry systems bylaw. The biggest changes, really. Number one, you don't just need keys to get into buildings anymore. Sometimes you need a code. Sometimes you need a card key. Sometimes you need something else. However you enter the building, that's got to be available to the fire department. It still has to be in a location that they approve, and the type has to be approved. All of that is fundamentally the same as it was before. This is a significant, this last one, changes the scope of the law based on the current model. All existing commercial buildings not normally occupied at all hours shall be required to comply with this bylaw within 12 months of the effective date. I don't know how many commercial buildings we have in town. I don't know how many of them are occupied 24 hours, 12 hours, 1 shift, 2 shifts. I don't know. What I know is that they've all got to comply if they are not occupied at all times. Because if they're not occupied at all times, if they're occupied at all times, there's always someone there to help the fire department get in. But anything that happens off hours, and as we all know, most emergencies occur at off hours, okay, that was just a gut feel, I can't justify that statement, but too many occur at off hours that the fire department needs access. Questions on that?
So like a Knox box.
Sure, as long as the fire department approves it,
Okay.
it's fine. It could be that there is nothing on the building, there is not a box. It could be that all the codes and keys and access credentials are physically handed to the fire chief and he's responsible for taking care of them. If that's what he approves, that's the way it is. Yes, I know I said he for the fire chief, assuming it's never a woman, which is of course not my intent, but,
Well, there's just not a lot of them.
right. In the same way that when I speak of a conservation agent, I always say she. Because everyone that I've ever known has been a woman. Town clerk I call she most of the time, because
Ours is.
Not originally, though, it was all men up until like 1900.
I could make an as it should be joke, but I'm not going to. I won't do that.
I tell your wife.
And she knows I'm afraid of my wife, so. Anything else on emergency entry systems? Right to farm. The current right to farm bylaw, yes?
Real quick question. When, for example, new building going in business, does that automatically now have to have a lockbox, or do they still have 12 months to get it done?
No, anything built after this bylaw becomes effective, it can't get a certificate of occupancy without this approval. The current right to farm bylaw is not clear in a couple aspects. One of those aspects is, to whom does it apply? Is it a right to farm for commercial farmers? What about the people who raise chickens, like my neighbors do? What about people who aren't set up as a primary business? Does it apply to them? And the way we've approached this bylaw is it should apply to not only commercial agriculture ventures, but also to what I call citizen farmers, folks who just do stuff. The right to farm is the right to farm, and it doesn't matter if they're doing it to make money for their own purpose, if they're raising it just to have food so they don't have to buy so much at the grocery store. That's not important, the why. What is important to the way we wrote it is that this applies as much to a citizen farmer as it does to a commercial venture. One of the things that is not clear in the current bylaw, and in fact, it says it wrong, is what the precedence is. That is to say, in the scaffold of all the rules and regulations, all the Fed stuff takes highest precedence, because that's the rule. The federal supremacy is a real element of the Constitution. Followed by state supremacy in both, by the way, I didn't say it, but I mean in both law and regulations. So feds take precedence over state, and from there, it's the zoning bylaw. Again, by law, zoning bylaw always takes precedence over every general bylaw. Then it's this bylaw, which is right to farm, and then it's all the other bylaws. So if there's a conflict, there's a very clear hierarchy of what takes precedence. So if there's something in the, take a silly example, if there's something in the door-to-door solicitation and peddling bylaw that conflicts with right to farm takes precedence. If there's something in conflict with zoning bylaw takes precedence. We made some changes to dispute resolution that talk about anybody who wants to complain about something that looks like a farming activity or that would normally be declared one, there's a process you can go through to complain. And that in fact, Agricultural Commission is empowered to act to mediate the issue. This third bullet clarified the rights of non-commercial farmers. That's what I was saying about citizen farmers earlier. If you go to the current right to farm model bylaw, yes, many bylaws have models, and right to farm is one of them. And many towns have enacted this. There is a disclosure requirement, so that somebody who moves into town is explicitly notified that we are a right to farm community, and that means, oh, there might be noise, there might be odor, there might be this, there might be that, because of the farming activities. So we added to this a requirement that landowners and renters have this as part of their agreement, that they are explicitly notified that this is a right to farm community.
But there's really no way for you to know if that gets done or not.
We don't track it because we don't have anybody to do it. Now, some towns make the Agricultural Commission, the people who have to receive them, and check to make sure that they're all done. We're not gonna do that to AgCom. We're not gonna do it to the town clerk, we're not gonna do it to the assessors, it just adds a lot of paperwork. We aren't ready as a town to deal with the side effect of having notification. But by notifying people, at least we can say, if we tell the top 6 builders in town, hey, and the top 6, 10, 12 real estate agents in town, this is now law, that it'll be just another sheet of paper that people sign. And I believe it will be standard, but as always, I can't guarantee it, and I can't force it to happen because I don't have any enforcement. We haven't found a real enforcement agency for it. Until that comes up, until somebody can define that, until the town is ready to define that, it doesn't make sense to say that we're gonna issue a fine if you don't do it.
And we reached out to other town clerks through the town clerk Google group, and many that had right to farm have the disclosure requirement in it, but no one could come up with a good way to enforce it, so.
It's really no different than when you're selling a house on a private road, you're supposed to be told, but it's you might not necessarily read it if you're, all those kinds of things. I get it, I'm just saying, there's really no way for the town to know. It has to be really on.
Right, so for those towns that do in fact have this requirement, and and some agency to enforce it, they're supposed to get a copy of every one. Again, it turns out to be a lot of paperwork.
It's right to farm signs on the every entrance to town.
Exactly.
Yeah, but nobody knows what that means.
Yeah.
That's the other side of it.
Right. Peter? There is a requirement that people be notified they're moving into a right to farm. Which means that if you're moving into a development area and somebody decides to put chickens in there, they have a right to farm. So you've notified, they signed off and said, yes, I know it is. Is there any requirement that if you're starting a farm, if you have the right to farm, you need to notify the town that you are acting as a farm by
No,
raising chickens?
There is no notification requirement of that anywhere.
Kinda seems kinda anti. You're forcing
but
people to admit that I'm gonna be there, but there's nothing there when I move in, but now I got no recourse if they do decide to do it.
But it's no different if I decide to put in my lower field, a very large vegetable garden that now changes the look from my neighbor's kitchen window out at the beaver pond.
I'm not talking about that, I'm talking about subdivisions, which is a very small piece of property. Cause I've had people come to me and complain about people who have done that in very close proximity to their house. So we can't let anybody know that there's a farm there because they don't have to tell us. Is what I'm saying, it doesn't, that
Farms
kinda.
pop up and disappear all the time.
Okay.
Excuse me, let me say that differently. Farming activities pop up and disappear in different places every year. Whether or not my wife and I set up the large vegetable garden changes from year to year. And so having a notification isn't particularly helpful unless you're also going to require a notification that you're not going to do it this year. But I might next year, because I notified you that I might. It's a hairy question, and in fact, is better addressed in zoning law than it is in
Right.
general bylaw. For example, somebody wants to keep pigs. By our zoning bylaw, you have to be 500 feet from the edge of the property. It says in our current zoning bylaw. So zoning bylaw has the ability to regulate the use of land. And if the town were interested in regulating the use of all farming activities, and you have to be very careful with that, but if they wanted to, it is easiest and most consistently applied to do it through zoning and not through general.
Do we have anything in zoning like that?
Just the one that I said,
Pigs.
500 feet for pigs.
Okay,
And I
500
think they
feet
say
from some-
swine, actually.
500 feet from somebody else's property?
Yes,
So you need a pretty decent piece of
a
property.
good piece of
for that.
property, yep.
Okay.
I don't know why that particular one is there, but it is, yes.
So what, you live in a neighborhood and you've lived there for 5 years and all of a sudden, your next door neighbor decides they're gonna get chickens with a rooster that starts crowing at 4 o'clock in the morning.
Yep.
And that's happened all over town.
Oh, yeah.
No, and people seem to
And there's no
think that
recourse.
they have to have a rooster in order to have chickens, and it's like,
Only
I
if you
mean,
want
when we
babies.
were
if you want
building
the
our
eggs, right?
chicken coop,
only
the
if you want
neighbors came
babies.
over to us and said, "You're not getting a rooster, are you?" I mean, we didn't get a rooster.
There
I
are more,
would,
there are more changes coming. I have had discussions with Agricultural Commission about changes to deal with when animals are involved, the animal control officer and inspections to make sure that the space allocated to the animals or fowl is sufficient for the number of animals there. We don't have the time to do that with this iteration of the law. It's coming, I don't know exactly when. Last I heard, we're waiting for the Agricultural Commission to write the best practices so that we know or I should say, the Permanent Bylaw Committee can pick it up and say, these ought to be the minimum standards. And whether it's zoning or general bylaw, I'll let somebody else deal with that.
But it's really no difference in a subdivision. If you move into a subdivision and then your neighbor decides to get, 4 dogs before you need a kennel? You have 4 dogs. Now in the morning, they let the dogs out and they see a bunny rabbit, you got 4 of them barking at you. It can change that can change, the subdivision as well.
The use of the land is regulated by zoning, which is all enabled through Chapter 41, maybe? I don't know, Mass General Law, which sets the limits for what zoning bylaw is allowed to do or not allowed.
Zoning's one,
What's that?
chapter 40 zoning, right?
I don't remember. Sure, why not? There we go.
Sounds good.
One more question for you.
Yes.
In the zoning, when you are putting farm animals out there, is there anything in there that says you need a certain amount of square footage in order to be able to rent a farm? Like,
No.
can you put chickens on, just cram them in there into 10 square feet, so to speak?
Today, you can cram in as many as you can fit as long as you are not cruel to the animals, whatever that means, which
Yeah, I was
is
just
very
gonna say,
vague.
what does
It's,
that define?
it's cruelty, it's safety, it's sanitary conditions, there's a lot that will go into it in the long run, and none of it's there today.
Yeah, we get a lot of calls for people that want to know if you can have horses in town and if there's a acreage requirement, and we don't have anything that specifies anything like that.
So somebody off of Blueberry Lane could have a horse in their backyard?
If they can fit the structure that they need within the zoning requirements, yeah. I know that the issue about animals and fowl on property and is the property big enough has been controversial in the last several months. Absolutely, it has been. The Ad Hoc By-law Committee doesn't have time to look into it to figure out what to write for town meeting in 3 weeks. Other questions on right to farm? Signs. The bylaw I like least. It is 16 pages of hell to me. And because it's so large and we're out of time, the Ad Hoc By-law Committee is not modifying this at all. A lot of people have a lot of thoughts about signs. The Permanent By-law Committee is welcome to look into it.
And my thought is that it's better in zoning.
I've said that, but
I'm not sure Norm agrees, but
just a simplification of the bylaw, because it is so
Right.
long and so complex. This is one of the reasons I don't like it.
it's
Just reading it is difficult.
It's hard to answer a question on anything, and you can't follow one kind of sign through another, and
Yep. Moving on to stretch energy code. The only change is that we changed the thing that it references in building code, which is the designation of the appendix changed in the mass regulations, so we updated it for that. Also, there was a section in there about when the bylaw becomes effective, when building permits have to apply. Well, it's no longer necessary because the stretch energy code bylaw is effective and has been for some time. So saying that everything up until July 1, 2019, whatever the date is, that doesn't need to be there, there's no value in it there. Schedule of fines. This document is out of date. There is no schedule of fines. Council has driven home the fact that the fines should not be separate from the bylaws that enable the fining and the violations. So everything that's in the schedule of fines is being moved into individual bylaws. So there's something for stormwater, there's something for there's a bunch of things for animal control, I was surprised. There's something for door-to-door solicitation and peddling. A number of bylaws have defined fines because of the non-criminal disposition bylaw that we passed, I don't even remember when, that had a schedule of fines. I was trying to carry that model forward. Town council doesn't like it, so we're getting rid of the schedule of fines. Which will also, by the way, get rid of all the conflicts between what's written in each bylaw and what the schedule of fines says. It's complicated. That's it for all the general bylaws. Now, for those of you who missed last week, next week, we will begin again. If you wanna come back and see the rest of the ones that you didn't catch last week, you're welcome to come and see the presentation next week, which will begin again. But before we do anything else, there you go. No, okay. I do want to spend a little time talking about the zoning bylaw changes that are also being proposed at town meeting. First one I sort of hit upon, kennels. All kennels are restricted, very tightly restricted to certain zones, and all require, by zoning bylaw today, a special permit issued by the ZBA. The proposal is to make it so that, like the the general bylaw says, you don't need a special permit from the ZBA for a personal kennel. So you don't have to do anything. Most people don't go to ZBA anyway for kennels. But if you have a commercial kennel or a veterinary kennel or whatever the other classifications are of kennels, you still have to go to the ZBA. All kennels still need animal control officer inspection every year. All of that is still staying the same. But what is changing is, in the zoning bylaw, is the requirement to get ZBA approval for personal kennels. Other kennels are still allowed, still require the approval, and we've also, it's actually more planning board than Ad Hoc By-law Committee. Ad Hoc By-law Committee initiated it because we knew that we couldn't have this conflict between our general bylaws and our zoning bylaw. So we wrote it, planning board took it over, and it didn't go through the bylaw subcommittee, did it? No, it didn't. But we've worked together, planning board and the Ad Hoc By-law Committee, so that we don't have conflicts. And one of the other changes is that we've expanded the number of zones where kennels are allowed to be placed, depending upon the zoning bylaw, the regulations in zoning and all the other general bylaw stuff with inspections and space. That is Article 4. Articles 1, 2, and 3 cover all the general bylaws. Article 4 is the kennel change. Article 5. What a shock. Different people write laws, and sometimes they have conflicts because people aren't quite careful enough. The managed growth bylaw, growth limitation bylaw in zoning restricts the number of building permits that may be issued, with a huge asterisk on the end of that, but by the building department. No builder gets more than 3 a quarter, I think, for a total of 12, and the total for the town is 30? I think, I'm just going off the top.
36? I think it's three a
30-something?
month, I think it's 3 a month.
Okay. When the growth limitation bylaw was adopted by the town, there is one specific sentence in there that says quite explicitly that residences built in the Rutland Heights property shall not be exempt from this bylaw, from this one article. That means that to build all the residences in Harmony Place, they can only build 3 a quarter, which is not going to meet either their needs or the town's needs for income, expected income from those properties. So the planning board's proposition is to strike that one sentence from the bylaw, leave the rest of it alone, but just say that that fundamentally is all that needs to be changed to allow residences to be built at the Heights. All the residences are tightly packed, they're 55 and over, they are fairly close together, and that's what I mean by tightly packed, and there's a lot going on there. But the project fundamentally we don't think can survive if it's limited to 3 units a quarter. Since they're duplexes, that means 1.5 structures a quarter. That's not practical.
Would that change affect any other builder or any
Nope.
other pattern?
Nothing else. It affects that, because this law, that line in the law is specific to the Heights Plan Development District, which is the Heights. It's that one zoning district and only that one zoning district. So it doesn't relieve anybody else of anything. And the exemptions that we have today, why can Bryce Lemon keep building? Because they're exempt from that bylaw, because they were working on it and they were an approved subdivision before that zoning bylaw was approved. And so they're exempt. The exemptions are the same. We aren't doing anything with that. We're just saying you can build at the Heights. And that's Article 5. Article 6. Special permits in the zoning approved by the planning board require a 2/3 majority of the planning board in order to approve a special permit. That's Mass General Law. So if one person is absent and one person abstains because of a potential conflict of interest, that special permit can never be approved. If somebody misses more than one meeting, they're not allowed to vote on it. To help with that, it's been proposed that the town adopt a certain section of Mass General Law that allows the town to appoint an associate member of the planning board, is what they call it. This associate member can only vote on special permit when somebody else isn't there. So most of the time, this person doesn't have a lot of action in the planning board. This will help get around we've actually had several times in the past couple of years, and Norm can speak more to that, where special permit decisions have been delayed and delayed and delayed because you need to get the right people in the meeting so that you can vote. So if somebody's absent, it shouldn't matter anymore. We also explicitly gave this associate member what's called voice. They're allowed to speak on other matters that aren't just special permits, because the fundamental belief is that the associate member is training to become a full-time planning board member at a future election. This is what enables that person to take part in any duty of the planning board. Not vote, but to take part in. So that Article 6 is adding an associate member to the planning board. For those who are interested, that person is appointed by a body consisting of the select board and planning board. So they get together and they vote. Questions on that? Questions on any of the zoning laws?
Are any of the zoning bylaws up on the website currently for anyone who wants to read them, to see them? I didn't
Oh,
look.
not the changes aren't. I think the changes.
I believe they're on the planning board page.
Oh, that's probably
I
true.
believe, but I can't guarantee, that they are on the planning board page.
Are they there?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Most
they
of us
are.
don't go looking for this stuff, but
I don't have to, I get it from Tim, but I'm just wondering if it's there. I mean, cause going to the town clerk's office doesn't work for
For most
everyone. Nothing against you,
no,
but it's just not convenient.
Yeah, no, and I believe Tamika has something on the website under town news about all the zoning changes too.
Yeah, but it's kind of pushed down now, it's not easily
to
found.
find.
It's, yeah,
Well,
cause
that's-
now we got the 200 per 200,000 and
Oh.
do you want the
I used to
concerts
be
on the
able-
common, everything kind of got
And
mushed.
here, there's a
I used
bylaw
to be
committee
able to
there
control
forming,
that,
and,
but
hey, well,
Right, there's all these
that
things,
stuff.
yeah, it got mushed way down, and truthfully, in my opinion,
It should be at
town
the top.
business needs to be, the big things of town meetings should stay up there until after the town meeting, that's my humble opinion.
I always thought so too.
Yep. That and election stuff, elections, that kind of stuff should stay. Cause people aren't gonna look on page 2.
Just you and me, Karen.
That's the only reason I ask, is I see the zoning, but somebody who might be interested in reading the full thing.
There probably, I mean, I suspect that, well, we have not constructed the packets for all the attachments for town meeting, so we will make sure they are part of that.
Oh, sure, but
And the warrant will be posted on Tuesday, and the warrant says that the town
That it's all
clerk has them
available,
and
so-
that they're available.
Yeah.
right,
So-
right, no, and I get that,
So
but
can you
I'm
tell we have a
just-
deadline
make
for
sure.
everything?
Yeah. No, and I know that because it clearly states it, and I know I can always go up to Anita's office, it's just that,
Especially this kind of weather doesn't make people wanna go out.
Those 6 articles, that's town meeting for February 15th.
at what time?
6 P.M.
Is that 6 or 7?
It's 6.
I think it's 6.
I don't remember.
Yeah,
Six.
it's 6 and it's.
I'm there hours beforehand
I
for
know.
TV
It's
stuff,
at-
so I don't.
It's at
Not
6
6 P.M. in the big room, Blair
in
Room.
the Blair Room at the library.
That's right. I still have to figure out how I wanna set up the room with enough space for FinCom,
Yeah,
Select Board, and all the other people who are up there. I have an idea, we'll talk about that.
there'll be different checking people in here too,
Hmm,
and where to put non-voters, so.
true.
I guess maybe we should take a walk after this is over.
That sounds like a good idea. Any questions on anything we've covered? Again,
Which day are you gonna do the first half that we missed?
next, 1 week from today,
On a Sunday, okay.
yes.
Yep, same time, same place.
1 o'clock, Sunday, right here.
Same time.
All my Sundays are booked. So, anything else we'd like to discuss? Is there any other business before the committee? Because we're still in session.
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Okay, discussion, roll call, Carlson,
Aye.
Turcott,
Aye.
Anderson, Crane, aye. We are adjourned. Thank you all very much for coming. I appreciate it. I really do appreciate the discussions.